Welcome to Game Design Hour, the podcast where I interview the people behind the video games you love. I'm your host, Miles Goldsmith, and today I will be interviewing Asaf and Eyal Geva. I'm interviewing them about their work on the video game The Secret of Retropolis. Let's get into the interview. What was the first thing that really sparked your interests in creating video games?
That's an interesting one. We came at it more from the VR side of things. We started by creating just interactive VR experiences that weren't games per se. And then during the process of creating these, we slowly drifted more and more towards gaming because these are the design patterns that just allowed us to do better VR, I think.
Also, I think this is the very technical answer for this because the spark was there from the beginning. Like when we were kids, we played a lot of games. We played so many adventure games. Asaf takes it for granted, but I think this was the first spark. And later, when we got to do VR, it was so early in how VR was set in the world. It was so early thing to try to do. It didn't was so game focused like it's now, I'd say. Mm-hmm. So it took time for us to figure out we want to do games.
Yeah, as Eyal said, we were both gamers, but we didn't give it a name as creators when we started off. We didn't say we're making games. We said that we're making VR, and then as time went by, we started to define ourselves as game creators.
And it was amazing to find out that we're doing what we loved as children.
Yeah.
It's something we discovered.
It's a great accident to be able to make adventure games.
How did you first learn how to create the VR experiences? You said you were doing it in the early days of VR. So where did you get the knowledge to know how to do that?
Yeah. So when we started, it was even a matter of knowing that there is such a thing as a VR headset, right? Because there were no consumer headsets at the time. And I went to university. I studied computer science. And there was one developer kit going around there in the department. And I tried it out and I got hooked on it. And yeah, next thing you know, I ordered a developer kit to my home. And I tried it out. I showed it to Eyal, and then from then on, it was just it's these eureka moments where you just know you want to create stuff, where you know that's something you want to create content for, because the potential was so big, but there was so little content available. We're talking I ordered the thing around 2016, I think, so just before the first Oculus the Oculus consumer headset came out.
How did you first think of the idea for The Secret of Retropolis?
You want to take this one?
Okay, it will be very realistic and less romantic, because the romantic answer would be some kind of a story about a rainy night, drinking whiskey and thinking about robots. But the answer is very, prosaic, day-to-day stuff. We were making a lot of prototypes. Asaf talked about those early experiments we made, those early steps. And we did so many of them, and most of them didn't click. We couldn't find the right idea. And later we did some other project, our first shipping project, final game that we made. It was here in Israel, location-based. And then we looked back and we found one prototype that was really interesting and we wanted to dig into it. And we developed the mechanics and we figured we had this eureka moment of saying it's a point-and-click adventure. And we added the puzzles and the humor and the detective and then the robots. Mm-hmm. And then it became The Secret of Retropolis. So we had many iterations, both for the puzzles and the story.
Yeah, even after we knew what the setting was in terms of the world and the look. and the feel and the genre and everything, it still went under many changes. I think we kind of discovered what the Secret of Retropolis was, what the game was, as we were making it.
Yeah, it came out pretty romantic.
Came out
when you say it like this.
Yeah.
What were some of the biggest inspirations for the game?
So many inspirations. It's a soup of inspirations.
So we talked earlier about the adventure games that we grew up on from the 90s, and that's a big part of that.
Say some names.
Some names, name dropping Grim Fandango, if you've heard.
We were obsessed with Grim Fandango, and we still are.
And other LucasArts point and clicks. The classics, Sam & Max, Monkey Island, and others.
And also all the other adventure games, Puzzle Adventure, The Longest Journey, Siberia.
Yeah, everything that was out there.
Neverhood.
Yeah, these are the games we grew up on, and we try to take as many good ideas and influences from them. And then there's a lot of like literature and cinema that's inside the thing.
Film noir, all the black and white films, Casablanca, which is funny because as children, we played Grim Fandango that has so many references to Casablanca, but we didn't see the film. So only later we found out it's all based, many of it is taking inspiration from Casablanca, but also Orson Welles films, and of course Raymond Chandler, who wrote so many detective books and also a few scripts for Hollywood. It's a big inspiration to the writing process, but also getting the mood, getting the atmosphere of that kind of dark 50s American pessimism, which we all love so much.
Were there any interesting ideas that were in the game at one point that just ended up getting cut?
Too much, a lot.
Yeah, so we touched on earlier on the fact that it took us time to get to understanding that the world is comprised of just robots, because beforehand the world had, and these were some playable prototypes at the beginning, where we had robots, humans, and animals occupying the same city of Retropolis. And so that went away pretty fast. Also,
I think
there were a lot of puzzle ideas and characters ideas that didn't make it to the final cut. I think we wanted to have another villain in the first game, and we saw that it didn't work, and so we cut him out and just left clues and hints of like an overarching villain.
Also, I think that cutting the good ideas out is maybe the thing that really makes a creator in any field more professional, or says he's not an amateur and he's like really ready to go out there and show the world what he has to offer. I think that at least us or me, when we started out making things, not only games, writings, animations, the hardest thing is to let go of your good idea to make room for another idea. But it helps. It's essential.
In games with puzzles, it's important to balance out the puzzles so they're not too difficult, that the players get frustrated and quit, but not too easy that the players don't feel rewarded after finishing it. How did you work to achieve that balance in The Secret of Retropolis?
So again, as we said on your question on how the idea came around, through a lot of trial and error, right? So instead of crafting every single detail of the game and the puzzles, and then shipping it and hearing from frustrated users that the puzzles are not solvable, we took a similar approach to what is being done in the animation industry, where you have like a full storyboard of the movie, you do a screening test, and then you hear from your audiences what they thought. So we're and also actually it's pretty common in the gaming industry as well. So we did tons of playtests. Like every 2 or 3 months, we would have like a full working version of the game end to end, and brought in people to the studio, preferably people who were playing VR games. So their feedback was relevant, and just watched them play, see what parts of the puzzles were too hard or too easy. That's the process. It's a balancing act between having too many details in the puzzles, and then it's just frustrating and people who put it aside, or the other way around is that you just feel like everything is too obvious, and then people don't even perceive the thing as
the most horrible thing is someone solving a puzzle and he doesn't understand he solved a puzzle.
Yeah, and that happens a lot in playtests. Like we think it's such a clever puzzle, and then we ask people in hindsight, how was that puzzle? And they were like,
they just click around and they solve it. Yeah. So it needs another challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And also I can say it's very important to know where you are on the balance, because the Secret of Retropolis is more narrative based. Like the puzzles are there to support the narrative more than the other way around. So we want the narrative to be like you'd feel the flow of the game, like you're watching a movie, like you're the hero who moves the plots forward. Like everything that happens is because of you, you're the protagonist. And if you got stuck for half an hour on a puzzle, it would feel like the story is stuck. But there are puzzle games that are like, I don't know, the exact opposite.
Yeah, much harder. And for people who are like into cryptography or, hardcore logic puzzles, yeah, of course.
And they're like, they have a narrative that's much more abstract, and like they're on the background, and it's there to be something to give you the right atmosphere to crack your head on and solve something that is really hard. You need to know where you want to be in the balance before you start to
where you're aiming at. Another thing I would say, other than just testing the thing again and again and again and iterating and improving, is to take note of your inspirations, right? So the inspirations we talked about earlier, it's not just that we're big fans and everything, but we actually took the time to study how they were designed. We looked up the internet for design documents of the game. We saw like what are the methods used to kind of develop and design their puzzles, and we took note. We didn't take everything because, as Eyal said, we kind of aimed at a very cinematic game, and so some aspects weren't applicable. But yeah, sure. I mean, our process was super informed by processes of people who we thought did a good job before us. So,
how long did you spend working on the story of the game in comparison to designing the puzzles and the experience? And what was your process for creating the story?
It's a hard question to answer, especially because in our approach, the story is so important because it's a narrative experience, narrative game. There's nothing that is not story. Mm-hmm. Like the puzzles are in our game, they're not separated from the story. I don't want to spoil it to anyone who didn't got to play the game. But solving a puzzle is taking action as a character inside the world of the story. Puzzles are both tested in how players solve them, but also if it's interesting in the story side.
And also sometimes a puzzle can be, a good puzzle, but not appropriate at that particular part of the story for that scene where we want the main character to feel a certain feeling. And so it's not uncommon for us to say it's a good puzzle, but let's move it to the beginning of the game or the end of the game so it better supports the story.
Yeah, and also about the process of writing the story, I think that what I found it to be very interesting that, I don't know, the most basic writing advice is don't write, rewrite, because writing something good is very hard. And if you sit down and say, okay, I'll write something good, you won't write anything because you'll be stuck and you'll try to write something and it won't be good enough because what you have in your head is not word by word what you want to write. You have an amazing vision and a blank page. So you write one sentence and it doesn't seem to be even close to your amazing vision. So you get stuck. So you need to write something and make it bad purposely, because then you can achieve your goal of fighting the blank page. And then you need to rewrite it. Maybe one paragraph was good. So you delete everything else and you take on from this. And then you have some kind of structure, but one of the characters is feeling a bit off. So you go through the scenes where you have this character and you rewrite it. So what's I find to be interesting, because I come from writing and screenwriting, that making a game is very similar, because you iterate. You make a prototype and you test something, and then you iterate and you make your program better. So the thing that is hard is to bring to the table a bad story. Because if you're a writer and if you bring stories, you want everybody to like you and say, oh my God, it's an amazing story. But if you do all this process of rewriting by yourself, you'll bring the amazing story, and it will be just a small prototype of one small puzzle, because you need to find out the mechanic of the games.
Yeah.
So you need to find out what the game is before you write the story. So I found that each time we iterate the game, we need to change the story, rewrite, make a few changes.
And also the story, that it's not a book where the story lives on its own, right? There's a dialogue between the story and the programming and the game mechanics and the puzzle designs and the art and the music, and
everything is a story.
Everything is a story, but everything needs to kind of work together. And so starting off, it feels like a band playing not in sync, and then you're kind of looking around you and starting to kind of merge everything together until it works. And so I think everything in the game is informed of everything else, and it's hard to disconnect.
Managing scope is a really important part of creating games. How did you work to manage the scope of The Secret of Retropolis, and how did the scope change from what you first started with to what you have now?
So our earliest prototypes, where we just tested the basic mechanics of pointing and clicking at things in your environment, these were a couple of minutes long, because that's all you needed to just test it.
If idea is good or bad, it's like in 5 minutes.
Yeah, you can
like
tell
a basic mechanic idea.
Yeah, and then we had initially a plan of doing something very, very short, like a really short demo, and putting it out there for free. But then playtesting that, we saw that it wasn't substantial enough for us to really, put it out there and for it to be like the first commercial game of the studio. And so the question about scope was always, what is the shortest story game that we could ship that would still, be meaningful, substantial? And so I think the scope kind of grew until we said, okay, this is good enough. If we grow it more, it will be better. Like, people will like it more because it'll be more playtime. But then it's not our attempt at doing the minimum viable product, if you will.
Because we had no idea if people would want to play it or not. We had no idea.
Yeah, we didn't know what the market was. When we started, Quest wasn't even out. So the number of VR players was like a big unknown. And what it would be when it'll come out.
Yeah, and we wanted to make like a sit-down game, which is more about the narrative and less dancing.
Mm-hmm.
So we had no idea if people are interested. Now people are really mad at us because the game is too short.
Yeah,
but we just wanted to make something and to hear from people, hey, it's too short, make more, and we'll listen.
Because the other option is that we wouldn't hear anything because no one would play.
What do you feel are some of the limitations of working in VR, and what are some of the benefits and great aspects of making a game for VR?
The benefits are easier because we're suckers for VR. It's just so much more impactful. Just the sound, the music, the interaction, everything is so much stronger. it's like the only thing that people do when they're at it. For the time being, they don't see notifications from their phone.
Which they will add it in the future.
Yeah, maybe in the next Quest update, right? Or maybe in the previous, and we're not up to date. Could be, but it's still even with notifications that will come.
Yeah, it's like going to the movies back when it was like a dream
when they just invented rules. Yeah, it's still
so impactful.
It's really it's much more fresh, and there's much more just new possibilities to explore what can be done in VR. And then the limitations is, I think the expectations are much higher for the fidelity of the interaction, right? We have so many expectations of how things feel and interact in the real world, and it's really hard to fall short. For example, like we deliberately didn't go into free locomotion or teleportation locomotion or kind of job simulator type of just free holding stuff and throwing stuff, because then it's so much harder to keep the experience on rails when you give that kind of freedom. But then if you have a limited subset of interactions, it's very challenging for it not to feel disappointing, right? Because you do want to feel a sense that it's a real world and you're inside it. And I think the most important job, if you're really working indie and trying to limit your scope, is to set your expectations right from the beginning of the game. And so in Retropolis, I think in the first scene, kind of, you see that you point and click and stuff, and that's it. And then you learn that that's how this world works, right? And that you're living in the mind of a character with its own wills. And so there's certain stuff that the character won't do, but it's all justified within the world. And I don't know, like what we did that was, I don't know of any other game that did that, is that if you hold something in your hand, it stays there until you put it in your inventory or on the table or something. And that's something that we wanted to introduce like at the beginning of the game, because if experienced VR players are already super used to kind of design schemes that we didn't do, we wanted for them to kind of shake off that weird feeling of doing something else at the beginning. And then as the game went on, they were already on board and knew what to expect.
And it kept them focused on what matters for this game.
Yeah.
And also another big limitation in VR, not in the aspect of mechanics, but of storytelling, you don't have a cut. Like, it's the most basic tool for visual storytelling in the last century. And you don't have it. You can, like, in any movie, if you have the cuts in the scenes, it gives the tension, it gives the action, you gotta have a lot of cuts. If you cut between two things that happens in different places, it's getting interesting no matter what happens.
Yeah, or you want to emphasize a certain character's emotion. You don't have a
cut to close up.
Yeah, you can't do a close-up, right? You don't have all the camera work that we know from traditional 2D screens, be it cinema, television, games even, right?
They use it a lot.
I mean, in games, you have the cutscenes where they do like all the cinematic stuff, but also in the game itself, it's like, if it's a third person, right, you have all the logic of how the camera moves to show certain things together with the character. Or if it's a first person game, they have so much control of what's in and not in the frame, like the hands, or they can take control of the camera for a minute, and that's all something that you don't have as a VR.
Yeah, I think that some of the first-person shooters were something we learned from, like Half-Life, where they don't have the cutscene. Then how they tell a story, it was something that was interesting to learn.
How large was the team that created The Secret of Retropolis?
We started off, the both of us, for the initial prototyping, first setting, kind of researching what was even possible in the space. And then we were joined by Daniel Ho, who did art direction and animation for the game. And then there's Yuval Levy, who did the music for the game. And the actors, of course, we had an ensemble of like 3 actors, and then some people who we did contracting work through Fiverr for like some supporting roles in acting. And let's see,
we had an audio engineer you could call sound designer who's got a lot of experience, and it helped us a lot to finalize and mix the sound, which is the spatial sound is very important to make the illusion of space. Like now we're in our bunker, and the sound is you can hear in a bunker.
Yeah, and we got a lot of help from friends here and there. Like, for example, on the programming, I got a lot of good advice on how to optimize for Quest and mobile VR from a friend who is a programmer at a bigger company. And let's see. Yeah, that's
maybe a word on the bunker. We work in an underground bunker in Tel Aviv. The whole game was made here, mostly during the lockdown. It's our version of working from the garage.
Which parts of the game did you have to put the most time and effort into to get just the way you wanted it?
I'd say kind of everything combined, right? Because for every art asset, there was like a music folly, and for every music folly, we wanted to have like this special type of interaction, or all the technical art of shaders and how the pointer interacts with different materials in the scene. So it's really hard to tell.
Yeah, the details.
Yeah,
at last the details are taking the most time and work. Now the big ideas. The big ideas come fast. And then big changes you can do fast, but then making every detail, in interaction, to make the interaction look good, the animation takes a lot of time.
The first part of our production was like us iterating, but then once we settled on the scope and the structure of the thing, then it took so much more time to bring it to the finish line, because then it was, we committed to something, and then seeing it through that was most of the work.
Were there any fun little details that are in the game that you think most players might miss, but you just really enjoyed?
So I got feedback from someone who just played the game not too long ago, who said he really liked the contrabassist player, the robot, who had a contrabass robot body, and then her head was just stuck on the contrabass.
So she plays on herself.
She plays on herself. And those type of like robot constructions are really, really cool. Stuff like that, I guess. Just the different people, the different bots inhabiting the world.
And too egoistic. I like the writing, like the sentences that some sentences I'm proud of. It's a spoiler. I don't know, it will spoil, but the driving to the desert, I love all the ending. I like the how the writing came out, because it was really hard.
Yeah, the ending I think was like an amazing crescendo for everything. Writing, the music there is just like everything works.
Yeah, and I like that people at the first they think it's like a funny game. And by the end, they understand it's getting pretty emotional and pretty heavy.
Yeah, I also like the funny little stuff.
Of course.
Like for example, in the dialogue, there's a line that I really like of like Philip asking some host robot in a club why they have restrooms in the club if they're all robots and they don't use them, and I really like his response to it. That just it's so rude of you to ask. Why would you even ask that? And that encapsulates.
No, you don't remember it right.
I don't remember it right.
No,
Do you
no,
remember
no.
the line?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. It says that in Metropolis, it's their job to keep the human past alive. Having toilets is part of this glorious past.
Oh, and then
Philip says, "Do you go to the bathroom?" And responds,
"Sir, that's a rude question." And I love it. I love it, like how it encapsulates the absurdity of the world
and the premise.
The premise, that they just keep some sort of politeness and etiquette there. It's the bathroom, and then it's the fact that it's not polite to ask, like a gentleman if they go to the bathroom, even though they're both robots. They
They don't need it.
They don't need to have even these kind of politeness rules, but they just inherited it from humans for some reason.
And they don't think about it too much. They're robots.
Yeah, they just do what they do.
What was the biggest design challenge you faced while designing the game?
I think that what we talked about, the initial prototype process to find out what game are we making. Like what are we making? Because we didn't even know we were making a game. To find out what we're making, what type of mechanics we will love to work in. It was very hard and it was very frightening because we had no idea even if there is such a mechanic or something or way that we can make our vision come true because we had just ourselves without any budget besides our time than our passion. So that's not exactly game design because it's what are we doing in this world type of question, which was hard. In the working of the game,
I guess just for us, it was always like finishing it. That took a lot of compromises, which is hard as a creative person.
Yeah, while you work on the game, you only see problems. Yeah. Because the delight of seeing it is once per version, I guess. Once per iteration, you have a delight of, wow, it looks so great, it's so fun. And then you play it again and again and again to solve all the problems. And then the only things you see are problems. And it's getting kind of hard to push and finish the game.
I'm going to go ahead and talk about another more concrete game design challenge that came to mind. And that's when to block or not block user interaction. I think the convention in point and click is that, it's like a turn-based game of sorts where you like select an interactable in the environment, try to interact with it, see what happens. And then after the consequences unfold, you can do the next interaction. And that is very, very, very counterintuitive when designing a VR game where the expectation is that everything is interactable all the time. And I think the challenge there was to kind of sell this idea, or for us at the beginning, we said that we won't block the user interactions for more than like 2 or 3 seconds, right? Like we said that's going to be the rule of thumb, that you click on something and then very, very fast you see what happens from what you did. Or if a character says something, they're gonna say like four words or like just 1 sentence. So pretty quick you can do the next interaction. But then we saw this rule of thumb doesn't really work because we wanted to do like deeper and richer reactions to what you do. But then, so we didn't replace it with another rule of thumb, but just like with caution and seeing that there are not too many long interactions at the same place, because then people kind of disconnect from it and get bored. And so we try to just balance, and if there's like something that takes a long time of interaction with like your interaction blocked, like without the pointer coming out of your hand, then the next interactions or the interactions next to it are much more like quick and satisfying. And that was a challenge like all over the game. Like every different scene, that was like a question we had to ask ourselves and check and recheck that we're
and cut a lot of things that weren't good enough.
Yeah, it helped us a lot. It was such a big challenge that I think up till the end of the game, like there was this question of, are we going to add a skip button? Like we always said, no, we can't, because it's a story game. Like if you'll be able to skip the story, then there's no game.
Why are you playing it?
Why are you playing it? Yeah, and you won't understand what's going on. So like every time we kind of asked it and then said, no, we won't. But like the challenge was so big that we always like asked ourselves about it. And are we doing the right thing?
Yeah, but
is it properly designed?
I think that in the end, we got to the conclusion that in some playtests, people were asking for a skip button. Like we asked them, what would you add to the game? What do you want to say? And they say skip button. So the lesson here is not always to listen to what people say, but understand what they're talking about. Why they wanted the skip button, because some sentences were repeating, or boring or too long. So they didn't want skip buttons for everything. They wanted in certain places where we needed to improve the interaction or cut some unnecessary dialogue.
Yeah.
So
there's no shortcut for that.
Yeah,
Like on both levels, both for the user, because there's no actual shortcut to skip a thing. But for us as creator, we can't just throw a skip at it and say, oh, now the level is going to be good. You need to handcraft the thing so it plays well and it's engaging and interesting.
Yeah, at the end, not having skip button made us have to make it better.
It forced us to actually consider every different aspect and like, if someone asked for a skip button, like a playtester, during a playtest, we tried to understand what's the underlying reason for that. Is it puzzle design? Dialogue rewrite may be needed. Could be many things.
Looking back now, what do you wish you could have done differently before the initial launch of the game?
Our launch actually was interesting because we launched first to the Quest App Lab, which had just opened 3 or 4 months before we finished work on the game. Like our initial plan was to release just to PC VR, to Steam and the Rift. And then App Lab came along and we thought, ooh, that's a cool opportunity. But it was like a soft launch, right? You don't get the same exposure as the official store. And only then, after doing this initial launch, we were able to talk with people at Oculus then, Meta now, and kind of just work with them to move it to the official store.
Yeah, and it happened only because the reviews and how people, like what people were saying about the game on Twitter and YouTube and in comments.
Yeah.
So if anybody is from our audience is listening, thank you very much. We're feel honored.
Otherwise,
it feel like just good luck that we have to have such an amazing players embracing the game.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, without the talk around the release of the game, I think we wouldn't be able to continue at it. And so that's really motivating power for us.
What was the biggest lesson that you learned from working on the Secret of Retropolis?
I don't know. We have it written down, I think, the postmortem, but I don't remember.
Well,
we did like a list. Yeah, we did like a huge list of like lessons and different things.
Don't take things too hard. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when you're in your mind of only solving problems, everything seems so critical and everything. Like there are many things in the game that we wanted to change and we thought they're not good enough. There were ideas that we thought we had to have them, but we had no time.
Yeah,
and sometimes you can take it pretty hard. It could be like you could get stressed and think, what if it's not good enough? And at the end, I don't know, there's some kind of magic that happens when you make the build of the game and suddenly it's a game and it's not a sketch and people play it. And I don't know what makes the game good or bad or a game that people love or hate. But it's not about all the things you're stressed out about.
Yeah, totally.
Like the narrative games in VR are amazing. And we are like so lucky that we get to do them. And I think that, I don't know, working on this so early and like there's not enough games in narrative VR. I don't know, maybe we're afraid that in the future there'll be so much Retropolis. We hope that Retropolis would be a classic and everybody will say, oh, we listened to them on Miles' podcast and we thought we had inspiration to go and do our narrative VR games, but there's not enough.
Yeah,
and even our they're short, so we want more. So in the end, I think that what we learned is how amazing is it to do and share our vision of immersive narrative games.
What would be your biggest piece of advice for a newer game dev trying to go and get their first game made?
It's hard to give advice without knowing someone, because I think that each time, I don't know, maybe talk with us if you're interested in what we do, because you can join us on this like join our Discord and we're there and we'll chat with you, send an email. I don't know. If you're a game dev and you don't have Discord, you probably should get one just to talk with us. People approach us all the time, and like the advice they need is different. Also, the advice we need, like we don't know everything. We just got one game out in the store and some prototypes and some location-based experiences. But we also need advice, and we seek it out from people with more games out.
What advice would you give to yourself, though? Like, I know it's different
to myself.
Yeah, from the past.
Get a haircut. No, but we need to think about advice that is okay. Not.
I think work in a well-defined genre, right? Both in the game mechanics and then if you're doing a narrative game, like what literature genre the thing is. And once you're working in a well-defined genre, then it makes it much more easier for you to talk about your project with people and to make informed decision of like, because you know how like people have expectations from the genre, and it'll be much easier for you to know what people expect from it rather than trying to invent the wheel.
Yeah, a few other advices. One is have a deadline. Without a deadline, you have nothing. And also, you can't do everything. It's relates to what Asaf says. Like when you're just starting out, you want to do everything because if you're a creator, if you have a creative urge, you have, I don't know, your taste must be something special. And you love things that are not always sitting with each other, like different types of movies, games. You seek out, you like go and try to do and find everything that is weird and different because you love the inspiration. But your work cannot reflect it. Don't try to make your game or work reflect you as a person and everything you love, because you end up with the soup of I don't know what, because you have too many ingredients.
Yeah.
So be humble, and you like it's the tragedy of life that you can't be everything and you can't do it like all you want to do.
Yeah, you need to make decisions when you're making a game. It's hard, or when you're doing anything for that matter.
What's next for you? What are you working on now?
It's a secret.
Yeah.
We can't say it in official manner.
We didn't officially announce anything.
No, but before we say anything, we hate it when studios or game companies says when a game is out and they don't deliver.
Yeah,
and it happens so much. We don't want to be those who promise something and then it's not. They don't deliver. And it's hard. And it's hard to say.
Yeah, we wanna officially announce our next games when we know for sure that we are able to deliver something that
Yeah, and we want to say like maybe when it's coming out. Like people want to know when they can play it, so they can start fantasize about it.
But yeah, for the time being, I mean, we're working hard at making it a reality of like more games by us, and
explore
different directions.
Let's say what we can say. We read the comments and people say the game was too short and it ended on a cliffhanger. Yeah, we know it ended on a cliffhanger. We know there's a villain that's hiding out there in Metropolis.
It's between the robotic buildings.
Yeah. Maybe he's doing some magic shows here and there. There's like one big Easter egg that nobody saw ever. It's crazy. Maybe we can say it, but
maybe.
You know what I'm talking about?
No.
In the plug and play scene, there's a big ad. This is something about VR that you could like put a big commercial and people like won't see it. There's a big commercial, but people spotted other Easter eggs that like can tell them about the big nemesis that's coming up. And we have like an amazing story to tell, and we're working very hard.
Yeah, obviously
we want to make a story. The story of Retropolis is something that makes the example of what VR narrative games can do. I think the first game is good taste of it, but we have a lot more to show and to give.
Yeah, obviously we really like the lore of the game. We're doing everything in our part to make sure that we'll be able to make more.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been great interviewing you.
Thank you so much. We had a great time.
And that's how the interview went down. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to give us a review or follow us on whatever platform you're listening to this on. To stay up to date with what's going on with Game Design Hour, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok at Game Design Hour. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I can see you next time. Bye!